Hi there. This week's First Chapter Friday is The Secret Library by Kekla Magoon. And this book is by one of my favorite authors. It's a mystery sort of fantasy about a girl whose grandfather leaves her a secret map that takes her to a secret library that has some really unique properties to it. And I think I'm probably a little biased because this is a book by an author that is from Vermont and who I've met before. And it's a book about a library, and I can see now why I probably am a little biased. But I also think that you will really like it. This book is on the Vermont Golden Dome Award list, and I think it's something that you'll really enjoy. So let's read a little bit of The Secret Library. So I'm actually going to start reading. I'm going to read you the second chapter instead of the first chapter because I think the second one is just a little bit more interesting and exciting. So in the first chapter of this book, we learn that Dally, the main character, lived with her mom and her grandfather. Her grandfather has recently passed away, and she misses him very much. He was her favorite person in the whole world. And she and her family are pretty wealthy. Her great-grandfather started a business and passed it down to her grandfather and then to her mother, and then someday it's going to be hers. So her mother is very, very strict with her, and she makes Dally, after school, take special business classes for 2 hours every day, which Dally hates. And her grandfather used to kind of help her, like sneak her away and help her have time to just kind of like have fun and be a kid, but now he's gone. And so in the first chapter, she goes to her mother's office and makes a presentation trying to get her mom to let her join an adventure camp that is happening at school after school 2 days a week. And she puts together this whole presentation, and her mom says no. So she leaves her mom's office very upset. So that's where we're at the beginning of chapter 2. Dally ran through the halls of Pete Harrington Place toward Grandpa's study. Fingers outstretched, she flung herself toward the door and oof! Instead of passing smoothly through as she expected, Dally slammed hard into the thick carved wood. The familiar large brass handle would not budge. The door had been locked since he died, but in her sadness and frustration, Dally had forgotten. She crumpled to the floor, pressed her back against the locked door, and let the train of her tears chug along. "She's horrid," Dally whispered, wishing Grandpa were there to hear her. "How could you leave me?" At the reading of Grandpa's will, she had learned that he had left her a bank account all her own, not to be touched until she was 21. The lawyer had held out a big beige envelope with her name on it, and Dally had stepped forward to claim it, but her mother had gotten there first. "It'll go in the safe," she said, "until you're of age." Dally didn't understand. The envelope was for her, even if she couldn't use the money until she turned 21. It would have been nice to hold in her hand the only thing Grandpa had left for her. She had sat very still in her school uniform, staring at the package on her mother's knee, while the lawyer droned on about real estate and investments and distributions and all manner of other things Dally barely understood. However, she did know enough about banking, thanks to her lessons, to know that you didn't need an envelope that big to pass a bank account to someone. If all Grandpa had left her was money, he wouldn't have needed an envelope at all. There was something more in that envelope. Dally was sure of it, but it was locked away, at least for now. Through the door, she heard the grandfather clock strike 4. Dally had only 15 minutes until her lesson started. "Miss Dally?" Hannah, the housekeeper, came bustling around the corner and opened her arms wide. "Oh, there you are, baby. You all right, love bug?" Dally scrubbed her cheeks on her sweater sleeves. "Yes, I'm fine." She pushed herself to her feet and scooted out of Hannah's path. She wasn't in the mood to be comforted by anyone who wasn't Grandpa, no matter how warm and soft Hannah's hug was likely to be. Hannah put one fist on her hip. Now, you know I hear everything that goes on in this house, and I figure it's about time for a cheer-up." She held out her hand, revealing one of Dally's favorite orange hard candies, drawn from a hidden stash that Dally had spent days trying to locate when she was smaller. Hannah always had a cheer-up ready whenever Dally skinned a knee or took a hit to her pride. Dally accepted the wrapped candy. "Thanks, Hannah. I'll take this with me to my lessons." There was a bit of time before she had to report to her tutor, but she wanted to be alone to think. As she rounded the corner, She tore off the plastic and popped in the tasty sweet. It didn't make her feel a whole lot better, but it certainly didn't make her feel worse. It was tempting, of course, to blow off her lessons and go riding or something. Sometimes she imagined galloping off into the distance, never to be heard from again. No one would miss her. What would it be like, she wondered, to simply run away, make her own way in the world? But she was only 11 and a half. The one thing that might change her fate, getting her hands on the envelope Grandpa had left her. That night, after the usual boring lessons and the usual dinner alone in the dining room, Dally lay in her bed thinking, waiting. She knew how to pick a lock. She and Grandpa had read about it in a book. They'd spent almost a whole week practicing on padlocks, and even then they'd tried their skills on several different doors around Pete Harrington Place, including Grandpa's study. Dally rolled toward her bedside table and opened the drawer. She rummaged through the hair ties and scarves and nail clippers and whatnot until she felt the soft lump of a leather pouch wrapped in its own strings. Yes, there it was. She still had her lock-picking tools. She pulled them out of their pouch, 3 slim, flat pieces of metal, cool in her fingers but heat-searing her brain. Dally slipped out from under the covers. The air was chilly, so she slid on her lavender dressing gown and stepped into the dim corridor, clutching the tools. Dally tiptoed through the halls of Pete Harrington Place. She could hear Grandpa's voice in her head, as clear as if he were standing right next to her, or right behind her. Dally Bird, I said 21, not almost 12. Extenuating circumstances, Grandpa, Dally whispered back. If you were really here, you'd understand. Picking the lock on Grandpa's study felt like shaking hands with a long-lost friend, familiar yet new, and warm with the promise of reconnection. The shadows in the hallway made it hard to see her own fingers, but Dally didn't dare light up the whole place at this hour. It didn't matter anyway, because lock-picking was done mostly by feel. The last time she'd been in the halls this late was with Grandpa, the final night they'd snuck out into the lake to swim. Grandpa in his hilarious crescent moon of a Speedo that her mother, and everyone, always made fun of, and Dally in her most comfortable black and purple racing suit, the one her mother said was not very feminine. Alone in the dark, we can be who we want to be, Dally Bird, Grandpa had said. He was good at making her feel better about all the ways she didn't quite fit in the world. They had slapped 5 in solidarity, then run along the dock and dived in, splashing and giggling and racing out to the basking rocks. Grandpa always won, of course, because he was taller and stronger than Dally, but she was getting close. A small twinge struck her heart. Now she'd never have the chance to beat him, a milestone she had been looking forward to with every inch she grew. Dally hadn't known that swim would be their last dance under the moonlight, but if she had, she wouldn't have done a single thing differently, and there was a kind of joy in that, swirling next to the sadness. She smiled at the memory as the lock twisted open beneath her fingers. Dally pushed the door inward, and Grandpa's smells rushed out at her. She closed her eyes and let them enfold her like a hug. Old books, fresh wood polish, echoes of pipe smoke, that ancient woodsy cologne he loved but they didn't even make anymore. He had rationed his last few bottles carefully, but not too carefully. Dally moved toward the sideboard, where Grandpa kept a few spirits, his spare reading glasses, and the cologne in its leafy green glass bottle. Dally remembered the day he'd cracked the seal on the final bottle. There was less than a 1/4 inch remaining in it now. I don't want to outlive this bottle, Grandpa had said, but I don't want it to outlive me either. That's a conundrum, Dally had answered. More like a game, Grandpa had said. When Dally looked confused, Grandpa had chuckled. You'll understand someday, Dally Bird. Dally touched the bottle. She supposed she remembered this conversation because it was one of the only times Grandpa had chosen not to explain something that confused her. He was usually the one person she could rely on to tell her the truth, no matter how long and complex or adult it had been. Maybe that's what was in the envelope, something long and complex and adult. With the door closed and the heavy curtains letting in only a sliver of moonlight, the study was like a cocoon. So Dally dared to reach over and pull the chain on the desk lamp. Then she moved toward the safe, which was hidden behind a simple gold frame containing Grandpa's favorite map. Dally had never understood his affection for the ugly old scrap of canvas, but he'd once told her it had been a source of great adventure in his life. She barely gave it a glance now, as she swung the frame out and reached for the lock. She knew the combination, of course. Grandpa had been less than stealthy about dialing the 8 numbers in front of her, and it was a sequence Dally was not likely to forget, given that those 8 numbers spelled out her birthday in reverse. She cranked the big dial, and the safe door popped open. So there you have it, The Secret Library. Come check it out in our school library. Right now it's on the Golden Dome Award special shelf, but it also lives in our fantasy section.